Good morning. My name is Brad, and I'm one of the pastors here at River City. This morning we are continuing in the book of Ruth in chapter 3 that you just heard read. This passage all week has been making me think about what might be one of the more asked questions that I've had in my timeline as a pastor has been this idea of how do I know what's God's will for my life? Or really how do I know what to do, right? Because I don't think most of us are under the illusion that we're gonna know exactly what's gonna happen in our future, right? I don't think most of us anticipate that that's how God is going to interact with us, is to give us a blueprint for every single thing that is going to happen and every action that we personally need to take. And I know one of you nerds is but the Bible. And yes, I agree. But I'm talking what should I have for breakfast today? It's just not all there. You're gonna have decisions to make along the way. And so we have this natural question of how do I make decisions? And what is this balance between faith and action? And that's where Ruth chapter 3 is, I think, a particularly helpful chapter at shaping your opinion of how do you make that decision by showing you that it's pretty complicated. So we're going to jump into Ruth 3, which is a complex story of the interaction between God's faithfulness and the actions of humans. Let's start reading again. We'll reread Ruth 3, 1 through 7, which says this. Ruth's mother-in-law Naomi said to her, "My daughter, shouldn't I find rest for you so that you'll be taken care of? Now, isn't Boaz our relative? Have you been working with his female servants this evening? He will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash, put on perfumed oil, and wear your best clothes. Go down to the threshing floor, but don't let the man know that you are there until he's finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, notice the place where he's lying. Go in and uncover his feet and lie down. Then he will explain to you what you should do." So Ruth said to her, "I will do everything that you say." She went down to the threshing floor, and she did everything that her mother-in-law had charged her to do. After Boaz ate, drank, and was in good spirits, he went to lie down at the end of the pile of barley, and she came secretly and uncovered his feet and lay down. We have arrived at this moment in the story where it starts to seem like, as the reader, the writing's a little bit on the wall. Naomi and her family, after moving into the land of Moab and suffering great tragedy, the loss of her husband, Elimelech, her sons, Mahlon and Chilion, who had taken on these two wives, Ruth, who this book is named after, and then Orpah, who was left in Moab and did not travel back to Bethlehem with the family. We see them in utter tragedy, and as far as we know, with no one to provide for what they need. I remember Naomi's words that she had returned to Bethlehem empty and alone. Ruth is a book of repeated language, if you haven't caught that. It is the author trying to peek you to themes and indications of how, when in moments of great silence and struggle, it appears that God is not speaking, how he might still be acting. And so Ruth does this by introducing you to terms along the way to pique your interest. And so Naomi's aloneness, her emptiness is one of those. But another word that perhaps you've caught several times in here is the word rest. Remember, when Naomi warns Ruth and Orpah about why they should not come back to Bethlehem with her, she says to you, if you come back to Bethlehem, there will be no rest for you. Rest is one of my favorite things. Half of the people here today aren't here because they're resting this weekend. Beautiful. Love it. Enjoy your lake house, right? It's one of those, okay? Enjoy to rest. I think rest is a tricky word, though, right? Because sometimes it's just straight up sleep. Sometimes rest is leisure, and sometimes rest is pretty elusive. The rest here that Naomi is referring to is not leisure or a weekend or a holiday, but it's like peace. I said a little bit, and by the way, not trying to be cryptic, but we had a kind of a weird, difficult past year in our family with some personal stuff that we were working through, which is over now and great, and everybody's good, and we've moved forward in a lot of ways. But I think the hardest part of it was the restlessness. That when you exist in a state where you're like trying to solve something or work through something, in particular if it feels a little bit outside of your control, it is just hard to feel settled. And that is what Naomi's warning and her fear was. She says, hey, Ruth, don't come back to the land with me, because if you come back with me, you will never have rest again. You'll never be at peace. You'll never be settled. You'll never just have enough. Rest is like going to bed at night, satisfied, happy, and full. Rest is allowing your worries to cease for a moment enough that you can find quiet. Naomi says to Ruth, she warns her, without someone to take care of our family, without someone to provide food and resources for us, shelter, to care for, to preserve whatever land existed in the family, to receive whatever inheritance was owed, just to continue the family name. She says, there will be none of that. It's over for us. How now has Naomi's attitude shifted in this chapter? Naomi in this sees an opportunity for Ruth. She says in 3, she says, my daughter, shouldn't I find rest for you? Now, all of chapter 3, you're going to see these little pieces of Naomi's language that feel really different than the way that she was speaking at the end of chapter 1. This is one of many times where I think you need to read the Bible a little bit slower, okay? Because what you're prone to do is to think that the distance from the end of chapter 1 to the beginning of chapter 3 was really, really short. In reality, it wasn't. We don't know, right? We don't know how long it took. So I think the author wants you to see that God's care did develop for Naomi and Ruth, that it happened within their lifetime, that he wasn't forgetting them, that he saw them, but that doesn't mean that just that turn of the page is enough for you to understand the depth of the pain and the length of it that Naomi and Ruth felt. There had been some time, but that doesn't mute the miracle of the fact that Naomi has now gone from saying, I'm alone and empty, to believing that there might be something there for them. And so Naomi, in this moment, she sees an opportunity. What Naomi really sees is she begins to see the writing of God's faithfulness on the wall. She sees an opportunity. She sees the interaction and the interplay of God's sovereignty in her and Ruth's life. She thinks this can't just be happenstance, right? Ruth couldn't have just happened along to this field. She says, Boaz, as one of our family redeemers, as one of the people that has a claim to make our family whole, this is our shot. And so she develops a plan. What's the plan? She says, all right, it is harvest time, right? This is when everyone would come to town. There would be lots of laborers from out of town hired and brought in. This was an all hands on deck kind of situation, all right? This was like Disneyland at Christmas time, okay? They bring on extra folks, and you're like, you're not the normal guy. You're like, I'm running the small world today. Nervous, right? All sorts of people from all over the place. This was a very a time of great celebration often, and it also often turned into a time of big partying, celebrating what God had done, celebrating the end of bringing in all this barley and then doing the hard work on this winnowing floor of separating the chaff from the grain that it might become usable. This was a symbol, yes, of God's provision, but also a time to celebrate that hard work that had been done. This was mostly the workers of the field, the men and the women who had been helping and taking care of them. And so these parties were known to be a little bit raucous, to say the least, to put them. It was like America's 250th, lots of fireworks. Just like that. That was a joke. It was a joke. Thanks. It was a little bit of a risky environment because of that attitude of celebration and the drinking that sometimes took place with it. And at the same time, we don't want to go too far. We still know Boaz is an upstanding guy. Maybe his party was a little bit more chill. But that's kind of what these things were known for. And so the plan that we have here from Naomi is that Ruth would get herself ready, right? She says, hey, I want you to get your Dyson Airwrap out and really go to town, right? Get that curly thing going, right? This is a new perfume kind of day, okay? So straight to Ulta with you. And we are going to figure this out. Perfume, man, I love cologne and perfume. What are we doing? $90? It's 3 ounces. What a joke. Says, get ready, make yourself beautiful, smell nice. And I want you to go, and after Boaz has eaten his dinner, after he's celebrated, after he's drank, and he's fallen asleep, I want you to lay down at his feet. Are you waiting for me to make it less weird? I can't make it. I literally don't know what. I've read this passage. I have researched. I even asked the AI because I was like, maybe it can find something. Like, in general, I'm not using this for interpretive help, but I was like, you got something out there? Look for me, buddy. Find it, right? No idea. I do not know how to perceive what's happening in this moment and what Naomi is telling Ruth to do, or at least what possibilities she's opening up. Because I don't want to spell it out to you, and I don't want this to make you feel like I'm trying to make a joke, but like she is telling a young woman to make herself beautiful and then go lay at the feet of a powerful man who's been drinking and just wait and see what happens. This just wouldn't be my plan, right? And that's why I really do want you to see that this story shows you something really important about the way that the will of God works out. And that is this. Sometimes you're not going to know, and sometimes you're never going to know what you should do or what's going to happen. Now, I don't want you to think that means that you're flying blind in terms of how you live this life, because I do think God's word is substantially helpful in helping us understand what our hearts should be aimed at and overall who we should be. It does have a pathway for us of pleasure, joy in the pathway of modeling and imaging the God that we were created after. But in the specifics and the messiness and the pain of this life, sometimes it's really hard to know what to do. And so because of that, I have heard this passage preached in a lot of different ways. I think I was actually pretty influenced as a younger man by a reading of this passage that said, see, take it into, like, don't wait, right? And I think it was geared at dating, right? A lot of times, right? It was like, see, ladies, take some action sometimes, right? Like, it might be time for a new blouse. Like, it was just weird, right? I'm not joking. I mean, this was like, and this is a common interpretation of this, is like, oh, that what the author is trying to tell you here is that God gets you 80% of the way there, and then you got to take a weird risk, okay? And that kind of strange, like, tempting and testing God to figure out what he wants for our lives is all too common. Like, it might not look this silly, but it happens in a variety of ways, right? I mean, it's in everything from that small, subtle prayer of like, well, Lord, if you just want this one to work out, maybe they could offer me the job, right? Like maybe that's how I could know. I'm not too ashamed. I'm in particular as a young kid or as a teenager, just being like, all right, God, if you'd like me to believe in you, why don't you say something out loud right now? It's frustrating to know, like, how do we divine what God wants for us in any given moment? This passage is not a story about how Ruth and Naomi took the exact right action, and because they found the key that fit in the lock, that God did what he was going to do. This is a story all about how the actions of God are not, were not, and never will be dependent on them or you. Instead, what this story highlights is the fact that their actions happened, that they felt certain feelings, and that ultimately God did what he was going to do. That God had promised faithfulness. That is what this story is about. This story is not about making the right plan or figuring out exactly what action needed to take. And this story is not even about how if you do the wrong thing, maybe God won't have it work out for you the way that it was going to. Like, if Ruth doesn't take this risk, does Boaz still marry her? You're probably tempted to say no. And if you box yourself into a belief that the Lord is waiting for you to take the right move so he can do what he wanted to do, you have now made God dependent on you. So stop the stress of wondering, am I taking the exact right move in this moment? What exactly ought I to choose here? Am I allowed to just want what I want? Like, do I get to just go to the gas station and pick the candy bar that looks good today? Or is there a greater plan involved, right? That seems silly, but we play these games constantly. And most of the time we play them in arrears, right? We play them trying to work out why the terrible thing happened to us. What didn't we do right? Why didn't I get it? How did I cause this? Friends, if we slip into this trap of believing that we either cause the bad or earn the good, then the gospel, which is a gospel of grace and forgiveness, becomes really, really difficult to interpret and believe. If it's only enough for forgiveness for salvation, but not enough that God look kindly on you. If it's enough to save you, but punishment is swift and God is excited to give it. If you're not only required to do the right thing, but to do the right thing in the exact right way, or else God's blessing, care, or kindness won't come, then you and I are in trouble. Now, don't be dumb, right? This is not an invitation to take wild actions. And I want to be careful here because, even though the actions here seem a little dangerous, right? And for sure, let's make it clear. The author wants you to know that, and the author knows it. We're not missing something in interpretation here. The author leaves it hanging for you, and he doesn't tell you if it was the right move or not, or she. We have no idea. No idea what the author's opinion or even what God's opinion is of this, because that's not the story. The story here is about what God did. So this doesn't give you license to just take foolish choices and be like, well, God's going to do what he's going to do, and so I'm going parasailing. No, that's not what we're saying. But this passage does say sometimes it's okay to step out when you see an opportunity. Because just like trying to force or earn or worry about whether or not we're doing the right thing for the will of God to happen, we can also take poor action in the fact that we're often prone to just taking no action, right? In that fear of doing the exact right thing, of making the right choice at the right moment, we can charge ourselves into this way of thinking that is just impossible, saying, I must know the mind of God that I might do the things that God requires me to do. So we don't want to act in foolishness. We don't want to live in inaction. So what's a humble suggestion for how we proceed and try to figure out the will of God? Well, one, it's that we would be moored first in the idea of just trusting God's faithfulness. That our actions are not what causes God's actions to take place, and that the actions of God are not necessarily direct implications of our actions, that he acts in the ways that he is going to act. And so we get to ask a few simple questions when we're trying to make a decision. We get to ask, is this outright sin? Is this outright sin? Am I violating God's clear and explicit will? And that requires sometimes some reading or some talking, right? Like we can discern that from each other and what we know of God's revealed and clear will. Because if the question is, well, God might want this to happen, should I sin to get there? The answer is always no. The answer is always no. Second question I think is helpful is this question of is God going before me? Now, this is the one that I do think Naomi seems to nail here. We don't want to make her the hero, but she nails it. Naomi sees that God is beginning to act in this way, so she doesn't feel uncomfortable to step into it. It gives her confidence. And so when God gives you an opportunity, when you do see that proverbial open door, although it's not going to be maybe as clear as you wish it was, it's okay to step through it. Even if you're not sure, you can take action without fear, acting outside of sin, acting within wisdom of God's opportunity. And then that is the last question, is this wise? Is this wise for me right now? The situation that I am in, is it what I need? So regardless of if this was the perfect right action or if it was a little bit of a foolish one, it's the action that Naomi takes. And for them, it does play out well because God's hand is in it. Verse 7. After Boaz ate and drank, he was in good spirits, and he went down and lie down at the end of the pile of barley. And she came secretly, uncovered his feet, and laid down. At midnight, Boaz was startled, and he turned over, and lying there at his feet was a woman. And so he asked, "Who are you?" "I am Ruth, your servant," she replied. "Take me under your wing, for you are my family redeemer." Then he said, "May the Lord bless you, my daughter. You have shown more kindness now than before, because you have not pursued younger men, whether rich or poor. Now don't be afraid, my daughter, for I will do for you whatever you say, since of all people in my town know that you are a woman of noble character. Yes, it is true that I am a family redeemer, but there is a redeemer closer than I. Stay here tonight, and in the morning, if he wants to redeem you, that's good. Let him redeem you. But if he doesn't want to redeem you, as the Lord lives, I will. Now lie down until morning." Ruth's request to Boaz here is substantial, right? It is not, please take me on a date, okay? It is not, please just take me into your household. Her request here is very specific. Her request is that Boaz would redeem her and cover her. Her request is that Boaz would redeem her and that he would cover over here. This is not an offer of just for provision or for food. This is a pleading for Boaz's help. And truly what Ruth is doing is she's asking Boaz to answer the prayer that he prayed for her just a chapter earlier. Remember when Boaz comes across her in the field? What does he say? He prays that she might have rest. He prays that God might care for her in this way. And so what she says here is, hey, Boaz, be the answer to God's prayers, or to your prayer. Redeem me, for you are the one who's able. Now, why that word redeemer here, right? Why the word redemption? And what really is Ruth asking here? Well, this is where we have to do some of that cultural work. Ruth's question here to Boaz is not just, will you be my husband? Do you love me? Do you think I'm pretty? Okay? This is not Love Island. That's not what we're working with here, okay? Right? Good. None of you laughed. Because that's sin. Good. Clip that from the internet. It is terrible, but this is not, do you care about me? Do you like me? Will you date me? Because honestly, that preposition probably would have been pretty easy. Like for Boaz to just take Ruth on and care for her and have her be one of his wives, no big deal. No. Ruth's request is, will you make my family whole again? To request that Boaz would redeem Ruth was to request that Boaz would take on him the responsibility of the entire family line of Elimelech. To say, will you care for Naomi? Will you make sure she has what she needs? Will you receive whatever land or inheritance we might be owed someday that we as women couldn't take on? And will you be kind and provide for us with it? Will you take me on as your wife? Because no one else legally can, in Ruth's mind. She says, will you cover me? Will you offer me protection? Because no one else can protect me. And so here I am at your feet. Now, Ruth's actions, and we want to say this again, Ruth's actions are not to teach you how to behave, but they do show you a behavior in the face of someone who ought to or who you need to redeem you. Her action is humble. She lays at his feet. She says, hey, here I am. Laying at someone's feet obviously is a symbol of servitude, is a symbol of submission, is a symbol of hierarchy. She says, hey, I need you. Her request is not love me, is not satisfy me and provide for me. It's cover me. It's be my protection. Be that which lets me walk through this world with success. It is a huge request. For Boaz to take on this family responsibility was for him to take on the moral responsibility of the continuation of the pride and the name of a family. This was big. This was everything to them. And we see here in this that Boaz chooses to act honorably. He doesn't take advantage of Ruth in this moment, this young woman lying at his feet. In fact, his first words out of his mouth are a compliment to Ruth. He says, Ruth, you are more honorable. You have cared more deeply than I even understood you did. He says, you could have gone and found a younger man, but instead you've come to me. Now, again, you may read this and you go, wow, Boaz is really kind of talking bad about himself. He needs some self-esteem work, right? You're beautiful too, Boaz. It comes at all ages, right? This is not about attraction or convenience, okay? You're reading this through your American eyes of younger is better, okay? No. What Boaz is saying to Ruth is that Ruth had probably many opportunities to get herself cared for. As a young woman, she could have found another husband, right? What she couldn't have done, though, was find another husband within the systems and the laws that she said she was going to bind herself to. What she couldn't have done was find a husband outside of a family redeemer who would care at all about Naomi. What Boaz is saying is not, oh my goodness, Ruth, thank you so much for being willing to have such an old husband. You could have found a young, attractive one, okay? He's saying, thank you so much for caring about Naomi, for your commitment to her and the continuation of her honor and her family. Thank you for being a part through your faithfulness to your promise to Naomi of God doing for Naomi what she thought was impossible. That is the thanks and the admiration that Boaz gives to Ruth. He says, you could have done anything. And again, Boaz shows us again that what he is looking for in Ruth is her faithfulness and her trust, not her perfect actions or some intrinsic quality in who she was. So Boaz acts humbly in this. He doesn't just take Ruth as his own. He is kind to take on the family, but he also acts honorably. And he tells Ruth, hey, there is a pathway here for me to be your redeemer, to take on the family, to care for you, but there's someone else who has a claim to this. Now, why did this matter? Okay, why does this matter at all? Because sometimes when there was great property at hand, to redeem someone as their kinsman redeemer was a blessing to that person, right? Because they might come with land or inheritance, and so they might have a claim to that. Boaz knows this is true. Boaz knows that 5 miles over the speed limit matters, no matter what you tell your children in the car. That was a confession for the week. Okay? No, Boaz sweats the details, and that's what you're supposed to see here. Is that the convenience of what you want to happen and what should happen to Boaz, this character that is supposed to show you some of the things that we ought to know about what it means to redeem, what it means to cover, what it means to provide for. These little types of Jesus things, these little pictures of who Jesus is that the author is trying to show you, this Messiah, the Redeemer that would to come. That it's not just important that they do the thing, it's important that they do the thing in the right way, that they're the right person. And so Boaz shows his character. He says, I'm not just going to take this as my own. He says, there's someone else who's a closer relative, and we need to go check first. Let's pick it up in verse 14. It says this. Oh, I'm sorry. Not 14, different chapter. Oh, it is 14. 2 weeks in a row. Sorry. So she lay down at his feet until morning, and she got up while it was still dark. And then Boaz says, don't let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor. And he told Ruth, bring the shawl that you're wearing and hold it out. When she held it out, he shoveled 6 measures of barley into her shawl, and she went into the town. She went with her mother-in-law, Naomi, who asked her, what happened to my daughter? And then Ruth told her everything that the man had done for her. She said, he gave me the 6 measures of barley because he said, don't go back to your mother-in-law completely empty-handed. Naomi said, my daughter, wait until you find out how things go, for he won't rest until he resolves this today. Boaz here acts honorably again to Ruth and protects her. He says, hey, I want you to stay here till night because it's not probably safe for her to go out. In particular, they're not the only one in this harvest party time. He says, stay here, but don't let anyone know because we don't want anyone to think any impropriety happened here. So stay here, I'll protect you. But he says, before you go home, even though I can't do this now, right? I can't marry you right now, this moment. I have to go do some of the business related to this. I need to check with this other guy. He says, I don't want you to go home to Naomi empty-handed. Boaz here wants Naomi to know that he is going to make sure that she is cared for because she is distant from this. He shows his care in this. And so he sends her home with this deposit of what is to come, right? He says, go home to Naomi, hold out your scarf that you brought, and I'm going to fill your scarf with grain so that you can take it home over your shoulder. And again, Ruth comes home with this abundant provision from the hand of Boaz. Naomi sees Ruth here, and she speaks to her with such clear words of wisdom and hope. They're just beautiful. She says this, my daughter, wait until you find out how things go, for he won't rest until he resolves this today. In this chapter, we see this complete shift in Naomi's perspective really come to fruition. Naomi at the end of chapter 1 says, I am empty and alone. And at the end of chapter 3 says, won't he do it? Right? It's amazing. It's amazing. Naomi speaks these clear words of hope because a mentality shift has happened from looking at the destruction that has happened to seeing the signs of God's hand moving into the future. Where we began with Naomi's aloneness, here we see that she is now bound to others again for forever. All of this to point you to a beautiful truth. That just like Boaz was the only one, that just like Boaz was humble and honorable, just as Naomi and Ruth so needed a redeemer to enter rest, so do you need Jesus. That Jesus is your redeemer. He is the one who observes the law. He makes every T is crossed and every I is dotted. He goes into town and he checks with the other guy. He is qualified to be your redeemer because he is perfect. He took on the flesh of humans that he might stand in your place. And he didn't come just to make a way for you, but to provide for the entire family, the human race. So what do we do with this chapter? Overall, I think what we are to do is this. You are to receive the provision of God, not as a confirmation that you did the right thing, that you've correctly divined the will of God, but instead as a picture of the kind faithfulness of God, which is outside of your actions. The book of Ruth wants to teach you that God is in control, both when everything is going wrong and Naomi wants to curse God, and when Naomi has a faith that seems unshakable because she sees the will of God playing out in front of her. And God wishes for you to know that while your actions in this life might have natural consequence, that his faithfulness is not dependent on your actions. And so today as you go out, don't leave here and act as if God's not there. As if he's not involved in your story. Don't let distress or exhaustion convince you of the lie that God is no longer there and no longer cares. As you wait in what might be joy or suffering, depending on where your story is at right now, take action. You can do your best. You can think your hardest. You can press forward without fear. But in your action, don't think so much that it is your job to control the future that you take the shortcut of sin. That you violate your internal programming to image God. Instead, seek your own joy through shortcuts and other means. And lastly, sit and be watchful. Open your eyes for what God is doing and what God has done. Remembering the faithfulness of God in the past and how it had nothing to do with you perfectly taking the right actions. And so look forward with hope that Jesus has in fact covered over you with his wing. He spread his garment over you, and he is offering you rest. Pray with me. Lord, let us find this rest here even today. Let us for a moment have a taste of what it means to be at peace, knowing that even though there are storms around us, there's peace with you. That even though there is pain, that there is healing that is promised and has been preserved. God, as we struggle to know what your will is, Lord, make us satisfied to have our hearts be content with what you say is right, to act in wisdom, trusting, Lord, that you've given us brains, hearts, and wills, Lord, and to lean in belief to the fact that you sovereignly have it in control. So we need not fear or be paralyzed. We can step forward in humble faith. In your name we pray. Amen. At this point, the hospitality team is going to come, and they're going to pass the red buckets.